Welcome to the third episode. Let's get started so we can get a lot of events. First event is that they kind of want to join the Yellow Alliance again, and so they do kind of let them, which frustrates West Virginia, which means these two alliances are at war. First thing that happens is West Virginia takes this part of Maryland and continues through some areas of Maryland, like there, and goes into New Spain in North Carolina. Later, Ohio starts getting invaded. This isn't the first time that these two alliances had a war, and Ohio's like, I don't even want to be part of this war, just don't attack me. But Kentucky does, since they didn't gain any land from the last war, so they kind of cut off Kentucky. And this is not looking good for the Yellow Alliance. But West Virginia realized the only reason they wanted this buffer state was to buffer. But they don't care now, so they continue pushing until they gain all that land, and they start pushing into the land area of Maryland and Kentucky. Kentucky finally had gotten done with it, so they do start pushing as hard as they could into this area, and they start going for and they start heading north through Illinois, until they're all like, let's draw a peace treaty after that happened. So, Indiana gains a little bit of land and loses a lot. When I say a lot, I mean lot of land. Ohio loses a little land. West Virginia. Bro, what's going on? Wait, I could just... There. And West Virginia gains... Bro, that isn't the color I want. There we go. So, West Virginia gains a lot of land. And finally, due to some actual stuff in a war, other than gaining a freaking puppet state for like a week, they couldn't find a way to get to there, since not a lot of them have it. Because they're north, they're not. Most of them are on a coast. But Illinois, Kentucky gains some land there. That's from Boy, Kentucky. And that was the first event. It was basically just these states. Didn't really get too north. But next thing that happens, the South Alliance expands into Louisiana and Arkansas. Later, Maryland decides to leave the Eastern Alliance so they can be in the Healing Alliance, and that basically happens with with these two places, those two places. They joined that alliance since it's way easier to be working and it's easier to not have to fight. Later, something happens over here where something happens where, like, maybe some of Maryland troops pass through here to get to New Amsterdam, which causes another war between, I guess, the purple greens just getting stuff. But this gives the chance to get the Gnald strip, I forget what it's called, but I'll look at it later. But they start pushing as hard as they can in there. They go over here, start taking big territorial gains. In the ice cream format is what I call it. And when they do cut it off, they don't. The less stable side, which is the eastern side, capitulates, cutting off Illinois from partners. Another way that they do this, they kind of just cut it off from ocean. So now Illinois is very vulnerable, and it's time for them to kind of destroy Maryland. So yeah, Maryland's destroyed. They stay neutral during it, and that's the only neutral nation. They go to reunite with them and start pushing into Indiana, and this is when they decide to draw a peace treaty. So they, instead of cutting it off with a weird border, they do one of these, and now they look like this. Next, they continue this straight line border until here, where they gain that land, they gain that land. Over here, they use some territorial gains, and they use a line following that curve to separate those two states. Wisconsin is very weak. And the strip is pretty split, but they decide to give the strip to them. And that was the new borders from that war. We are 8 minutes in, so we can continue. Some disputed territory arises because they just learned that Texas always thought that it was theirs. And then Oklahoma thought it was theirs, of course. And the Panhandle itself just wants to be independent as Panhandlia. So all three of them go to war. Oklahoma, before it joins the Southern Alliance, and they join the War Recovery Alliance because they want to recover from the war easily. So they start pushing in, and they start actually doing a good job of pushing. And they do the spike trap. And then they do take a big chunk of their army to kind of bop. And that's when Texas recognizes it and doesn't want to mess with it anymore, because they are losing dramatically. Bad loss for Texas. And Oklahoma does the same thing. So that happened. Even more news. They kind of just call it the support. The support, because they call it the Support Alliance now instead of the War Support Alliance, since a lot of their alliance, which is these three, all just won a war. And also Hawaii applied because they're sinking. And something happened in the ocean where Puerto Rico starts to sink as well due to global warming, like I said. And now it's this time for the new election. It's Chad, who is Chad, and then versus Karen, a nice person, but due to their name and stereotypes, Karen loses, and Chad does some stuff to some of the borders. This is now known as the Republic of Chad, because now we're acting like this is just, I'm kidding, that didn't happen. Beep. Yeah, because these are all independent nations. And Russia does try to make a landing over in Alaska, which they do. The CSTO will be pink. So, they make a landing in Alaska, which causes them to all declare war on Russia, which causes something. NATO was they applied for NATO, but they got accepted to represent the United States in the NATO again, and they're part of their alliance, so they declare war, and this is the Russian war. So first thing that happens is they start pushing in and split off Russia's territorial gains. Over in Europe, they capture Kaliningrad, and this is when Russia really just falls. In North America, it loses a lot of land, and the Ukrainian war would have ended by now, but that's really what happened to Russia. With all the neutral states right now, Colorado doesn't really like being in this alliance anymore because of how bad they treat their people. So they create a new alliance, the Four Corners Alliance, which is mainly to represent the peace and ingenuity between the four corners. And Nevada is going through struggles with Las Vegas being its own country, joins the support group, and Nevada has to deal with it because they don't want it to deal with that. And they later make a Western Alliance. But that's only after Cascadia reforms, because they felt like since they would be better working together than alone, they can work together as Cascadia. And they will be represented by light green. Not that light green, this light green. But since the line's kind of like this, they can invite Kansas but not Missouri. So they joined the Eastern Alliance, and that's where I'm ending it today.